This is the shofar, the ram's horn. It's been the sound of the Jewish New Year for 2,500 years. As a Jew in our Unitarian Universalist community, Happy New Year to you, Shana Tova. Also, I want to tell you while that video was on, I looked through the whole list of attendees, and it's so great to know that you're all here. So last year, I actually got a shofar gig. That's an unusual thing. Most congregations just have a member play. As you can see, it's not a very sophisticated musical instrument. Basically, it just needs to be loud. But there was a Jewish club in a planned community on the west side of town that didn't have services normally, and they would hire a retired rabbi to lead High Holy Day services once a year. And last year, they didn't have anyone willing to play, and that rabbi found me. Now, we had seen more anti-Semitic violence in 2018 in the US than we had in generations. All of the local synagogues had started having armed guards during services. And when the rabbi spoke, he sounded really depressed. Basically, his entire sermon was, "We thought we were safe. We're not. We thought we could trust our neighbors. We can't. I'm sorry I don't have better news." That was basically it. I feel more hopeful than he did. I know that you're all potential allies to Jews. In this sermon, I'll share a few things that I think will help you be allies to Jews. I'll explain some basics about anti-Semitism, which is back, but also never left. I'll give a few examples of what it looks like, from little microaggressions to full-fledged conspiracy theories, and I'll share a little about the movement to end it. So let me take you back to the European Middle Ages. Land at that time was ruled by lords under the permission of the Catholic Church. As trade developed, lords wanted to be able to get interest when they loaned money, but the church forbade Christians from lending money. And so the lords required Jews, because they weren't Christians, to be their money lenders. We were peasants, we were considered dirty because we weren't Christian, but we had a culture of reading and writing. And so we were able to fill key jobs in government and banking. When times were good, we were accepted and our skills were valued. When things got bad and people threatened revolution, the lords of society held on to their own power by blaming my people. They said we were greedy and had stolen the country's money. They said we were to blame for the famines and the plagues. They said we had killed Jesus Christ and that we prayed to the devil. They spread the myth of blood libel, that we killed Christian children and cooked with their blood. They said we were more like animals than people, a lie that many years later would be said about people of color. And then we would be killed and expelled from the country. So let me just share with you here a map of Jewish expulsions in Europe between 1100 and 1600 AD. That's a lot, right? It's really a lot. And that's more or less how anti-Semitism has operated for 2,000 years. When Jews are blamed or isolated or hated, that's anti-Semitism. And when Jews blame themselves or hate themselves or isolate themselves, that's internalized anti-Semitism. And Jewish liberation would be the opposite, remembering that we're good people being closely connected. public anti-Semitism is still dormant during good times, and we forget about it at those times, and we think it's gone away. And then, at times like this, when the economy collapses, particularly when the church is aligned with the state, right? If you have a government like right now that's influenced by the Christian right, it resurfaces in public. That's why we've seen so much more anti-Semitism in the last few years. And all of those lies from the Middle Ages about my people have survived in one way or another. Each of us has grown up with and learned some anti-Semitism, including us Jews. I see some questions in the chat. Someone asking how Jewish people relate to gypsies. That I don't know. I'd have to do more research. But let me show you something else. Let's see. This is these are the results from a British survey done from 2004 to 2012. The different bars in the graph are years. When you look at the middle two statements, you can see during those years, when shown the statements, Jews have too much power in the business world, or Jews have too much power in the international financial markets, about 15%, or 1 out of every 6 people, categorized that statement as probably true. I don't know, probably. And that it's not true, it's a lie. We wrongly think that Jews have more money and privilege than they actually do. If a Jew doesn't want to buy something, please don't assume that they could afford it, but don't want to pay because they're cheap. If your HOA needs a treasurer, don't pick the Jew because they're probably good with money. Those are anti-Semitic microaggressions. And to look at the bigger lies, the world is not run by a Jewish conspiracy of media, banking, and political power. If you felt like I didn't need to say that and that's all ridiculous, well, congratulations on not being Hitler. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound ridiculous to a lot of people. In researching this sermon, I found writings about how Jews are secretly responsible for funding the entire Democratic Party, for funding the terror attacks on the World Trade Center, for controlling the US Federal Reserve, for creating ISIS, and for undermining Western civilization. Sort of a catch-all. It's been a really fun week of reading. In Europe, far-right nationalist groups blame Jews for the increased immigration of Muslims. The shooter who killed 11 Jews in a Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018 did it because he believed that Jews were secretly funding a caravan of refugees that was heading north through Central America. He was encouraged in this belief by our current president, who called those refugees murderous thugs from other countries who will kill us all, lied that criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in to that caravan, and retweeted a video of cash being handed to migrants that had been shared the day before by Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz, who had asked Soros time to investigate the source. Just double checking the chat here. All right. To understand that last bit I said about Soros, you have to know that anti-Semitism is often communicated in dog whistles, code words that refer to these big lies without having to say the word Jews. Common anti-Semitic dog whistles are elites, globalists, European-style socialists, the deep state, Zionists, when used to refer to Jews anywhere as opposed to the political party, and also name-dropping wealthy Jews like George Soros or the Rothschilds. If you think I'm stretching and that maybe dog whistles aren't real, let me give you another example. 2 years ago, after a terrible shooting at a majority Jewish high school in Parkland, Florida, students from that school restarted a national conversation about gun violence. In response, the head of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre, accused those students of being part of a plot to destroy America's freedom, which was funded by, and I quote, people like George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, and more, unquote. Now, those folks he mentioned are all Jews, but they're also all wealthy and Democrats and white and men. He never said anything about Jews. But the next day, the neo-Nazi website, the Daily Stormer, ran the headline, "The NRA representing white people against the Jews." And the neo-Nazi website InfoStormer wrote, "There is no denying the Jewish role in pushing for gun control, and it is good to see the NRA is now indirectly exposing this fact." Directly connected to these conspiracies is the anti-Semitic idea that Jews are unethical, cunning, or scheming. Please, please, don't tell someone who treats you kindly, who picks you up on the side of the road, that you must be a Christian because you're so kind. If that person is a Jew or a Muslim, that's a microaggression. Don't use Jew as a verb meaning to negotiate for a better price. Trump's regular references to Jewish Representative Adam Schiff as Shifty Schiff plays on this anti-Semitic trope. Okay, let me give you some bigger versions. It's a relief to hear about people who are much more awful than you are, right? And just, I ask your permission. I love seeing that there's so much action in the chat, but I'm not going to engage. I don't have time. I'm going to stick with the script. I'll check your questions later and get back to you. Okay, so a much more awful thing. You remember the blood libel? The idea that Jews were allied with the devil, had little horns under our hair, killed Christian children, drank their blood. It was the motivating lie for the Nazis. Well, guess what? The QAnon movement is a rapidly growing right-wing conspiracy about a shadow government, a deep state, that controls the world through media and banking, and also kidnaps children, abuses them, and harvests their blood. QAnon sees Donald Trump as a savior who will protect the white race in almost the same way that the Nazis saw Adolf Hitler. And QAnon message boards and forums are full of anti-Semitic references to a Zionist-controlled world government, the elders of Zion, and the Rothschild family. Thank you, Nabi. Yes, boo! I can take that from the chat, yeah. If you see the hashtag Save the Children, it unfortunately doesn't refer to the actual refugee children and families our government is holding in cages at our southern border. It's part of this modern blood libel. Now, 2,000 years of hatred have left Jews with a lot of heavy fears. We can be irrationally urgent and terrified about small things, as if the Nazis might knock on our doors at any minute. And after 2,000 years of being allowed to survive because we were useful, we tend to do our jobs as if our lives depend on it. Some of you know this about me. I've heard it said that when a Gentile gets scared, they watch television. When a Jew gets scared, they start another nonprofit. So please, with the Jews you know, as much as you can, respond to those fears with love, understanding, and connection, not with blame, hatred, or isolation. And politically, I would ask the same thing in our relationship to the state of Israel. Yes, the treatment of Palestinian citizens in Israel is racist and horrible by the government. We can and should organize and speak up against those policies in support of Palestinian lives and in support of Palestinian liberation. But blaming and hating and isolating Israel for those policies isn't helping. In fact, it plays into a pattern of anti-Semitism and it makes Jews more afraid. Also, please remember that in the wider picture, Israel is part of this pattern of Jews being required to do key jobs for the ruling class and then attacked as if they were in charge. By hosting US military bases and buying massive amounts of US-made weapons, Israel is a key military base for the United States. If you blame Israelis for being colonizers, it's true, but if you don't blame the US at the same time, you're missing the bigger picture. The last thing I want to explain, and this is a little tangential, but it's really important, is how anti-Semitism has been weaponized to disrupt social justice work. This can be a little confusing, so I'll give a lot of examples. Do you remember the energy of the Women's March immediately after the 2016 election? Massive energy. Do you remember why that energy faded in 2018? Sure, it was probably mostly our own sexism. Yes. But also, one of the march organizers, Linda Sarsour, was accused relentlessly of being anti-Semitic because of a personal connection to the anti-Semitic minister, Louis Farrakhan. Now, Sarsour has consistently been an organizer with Jews and against anti-Semitism. She raised $150,000 for funeral expenses for the victims of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. And she immediately denounced Farrakhan's anti-Semitic beliefs and explained that it was just a personal connection. But so many articles were published attacking her and the Women's March as being anti-Semitic that many decided not to attend. Do you wonder why the left took so long to rally behind the Black Lives Matter movement? Yes, of course, it was mostly our own racism. But also, in 2016, Black Lives Matter was accused relentlessly of being anti-Semitic. Now, these attacks were pointed at the 2016 Vision for Black Lives, which was over 100 pages. None of those pages, or any of the policy recommendations in it, mentioned Jews or Israel or said anything anti-Semitic. But one of the resources that was linked to from that document, which was about cutting US military spending, singled out Israel for blame, and it was anti-Semitic in that way. And hundreds of stories and posts were published in 2016 highlighting that section and casting doubt on whether people who wanted social justice should really support the movement for Black lives. Let me give one more. Representative Ilhan Omar, a progressive Democratic member of the House, elected in 2018, and one of only 2 Muslim representatives in Congress, has several times criticized the state of Israel in anti-Semitic ways. Each time when people brought those statements to her attention, she directly apologized. In response, Republican representatives demanded that Democrats punish her, censure her. President Trump, who, remember, is a president who has often supported and shared anti-Semitic statements by Republicans, our president called on her to resign from Congress. Even in our own Unitarian Universalist General Assembly 5 years ago, a resolution condemning racism wasn't taken. There was no decision made on it because the Assembly got distracted and divided by a resolution that condemned Israel. And so many representatives in the room and delegates were attacked on both sides as being anti-Semitic that resolution on racism wasn't brought up for a vote. Do you see the common thread here? In each case, coalitions working for justice are divided and weakened when they, and particularly people of color in their leadership, are accused of being anti-Semitic. I could easily name 5 more situations like this. I'm not saying that any suggestion of anti-Semitism is untrue. On the contrary, we probably all have some, right? And it's our job to root it out wherever we are on the political spectrum. But accusations of anti-Semitism have been consistently used to divide movements for justice. I see Connie asking how to change that. The way to change it is to do proactive work in supporting Jews and supporting proactive partnerships between Jews and Palestinians in every coalition that works on social justice, proactively before the attacks come at you. And that is a great segue to how I want to end, which is letting you know what you can do to help, whether you're Jewish or not. We don't actually have a strong movement of non-Jews organizing to end anti-Semitism, but I hope you can tell we need one. The first thing you can do, of course, is to love the Jews that you know. Encourage them to be connected to people. Encourage them to be connected to people in ways that aren't just being useful and competent. And react to their big fears with understanding and connection, rather than blame and isolation. Second, we can do our own personal work. I would love to suggest holding groups that meet a few times each year. And in those groups, we could talk about our personal experiences with Jews and with anti-Semitism. Talk about what gets in our way of loving the Jews that we know, and what gets in our way of taking responsibility to ensure that no Jews are ever mistreated in this way again. Now, it's most effective for Jews and Gentiles to do this work separately at first. Both groups would also benefit by talking about their personal experiences with Arabs and with the Palestinian people, as those relationships are an important part of Jewish liberation. If any of you want to start a group like that at UUCP, let me know. I think that would be really exciting. I think it would be really exciting, and I would support you in that. And third, we can do public work. We can speak up when we see anti-Semitism. We can make sure, as I said before, that any social justice coalitions we work with include anti-Semitism in the list of oppressions that they address. We can be proactive in those groups about getting Jews and together ahead of time and making sure everyone understands how to support them in case claims of anti-Semitism come in. And we can just be aware of how those accusations have been weaponized. Just so you know, to give you some hope, there are some groups doing good work on anti-Semitism. I'll mention 2 of my favorites. Neither is based in Phoenix. One is a group in New York City called Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, which is led almost completely by Jewish people of color. They've been organizing for 30 years on justice issues like racism in policing and labor protections. They offer wonderful anti-Semitism trainings for non-Jewish social justice activists. So if there are groups you know that want that, I would refer you to them. A link to their organization will be in the chat. And the Parents Circle Families Forum is one of many organizations in Israel that gets together Israelis and Palestinians to talk and grieve together. That one is specifically for families who have lost family members in the ongoing conflict, and they've just done wonderful work. So.